$5,000 doesn't fold. It sits there like a brick of possibility. 50 $100 bills bound together with a single rubber band, resting on the scratched laminate table like it had every right to be there. Callie Parker's hand froze 6 inches above it. Her fingers twitched. Nobody was watching. The security camera above the register had a piece of duct tape over the lens had for 2 months now. Her manager, Rick, was in the kitchen arguing with the cook about portion sizes, his voice carrying through the service window. The lunch rush had cleared out 20 minutes ago. It was just her, 4 empty tables, and $5,000 that belonged to the man with the dragon tattoo curling up from beneath his collar. She knew it was a mistake. She'd watched his hands shake when he answered that phone call mid-meal, watched his jaw clench as a rapid stream of Korean poured through the speaker, too fast for her to catch more than the tone urgent, angry, afraid. Watched him stand abruptly, knocking his water glass, not bothering to write it as water spread across the table. He'd thrown down the envelope without looking, without checking. His mind already somewhere else, somewhere darker. This wasn't a tip. This was a man in crisis, leaving evidence behind. And keeping it would make her a thief. But letting it go meant Mrs. Gable, her landlord, would be changing the locks on her apartment door by Friday. It meant another week of rationing instant ramen and pretending she wasn't hungry. It meant watching her dreams of finishing college dissolve into the reality of survival. She had 20 seconds to make a choice. 20 seconds to decide who she was when the universe wasn't looking. What she did next wouldn't just change her Tuesday. She made a decision that would drag her into a world of billion-dollar betrayals and corporate warfare, where her waitress apron would become armor and her honesty would become a weapon. But first, she had to catch a billionaire running toward a catastrophe he didn't see coming. And she had exactly 7 minutes before his black sedan disappeared into downtown traffic forever. If you're already feeling the weight of Kallie's impossible choice, you need to stay with me. What she does in the next 90 seconds will either destroy her life or rebuild it from the ground up. Don't miss what happens next. The Riverside Diner was the kind of place where truckers ate breakfast at 3 a.m. and downtown office workers grabbed overpriced sandwiches at lunch. It smelled permanently of coffee, grease, and the lemon cleaner Callie used to wipe down the red vinyl booths. Callie Parker had worked there for 2 years, long enough to know that the espresso machine only worked if you kicked it twice on the left side, and that most customers looked at her name tag without ever really seeing her face. She'd been wiping down table 6 for the second time, her right shoulder aching from carrying trays all morning. The orthopedic inserts she'd bought at the dollar store had flattened into useless foam after 3 weeks. Her shift had started at 6 a.m. It was now 2:47 p.m. Her body was running on muscle memory and spite. The eviction notice was folded in her apron pocket. She'd read it 4 times during her bathroom break, each time hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. 3 days. Pay $2,400 or vacate the premises. Mrs. Gable wasn't playing anymore. Table 9 needs a refill. Rick's voice cut through her thoughts. Rick was a squat man with a perpetual scowl and the management style of a drill sergeant. He treated the waitstaff like expendable parts in a machine that barely functioned, but he'd never missed a paycheck, and in Kallie's world, that counted for something. On it, Kaylee said, grabbing the coffee pot. Table 9 was in the corner booth, the spot truckers liked because they could see both doors. She made her way across the black and white checkered floor, her sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. The man sitting in booth 9 made her stop mid-stride. He was younger than she expected, mid-30s, maybe, but he wore his expensive suit like armor, every line sharp enough to cut. His black hair was styled back, revealing a face that belonged in a business magazine, all angles and intensity. But it was the tattoo that caught her attention. A dragon, rendered in intricate black and gray, coiled up from beneath his collar, the creature's head just visible above his crisp white shirt. His eyes were on his phone, but his jaw was tight, his free hand clenched into a fist on the table. He looked like money. More than that, he looked like power that had forgotten how to rest. Callie approached with the coffee pot. "Refill, sir?" He didn't look up. "Americano, black, no sugar." His accent was faint but present, Korean American, the kind that came from someone who'd learned English young but still thought in another language. "We don't have," Callie started, but his phone rang, and he answered it before she could finish. Korean exploded from the speaker, a man's voice tight with panic. The customer's expression shifted from annoyance to alarm in half a heartbeat. He stood so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. The conversation was fast, clipped, full of words Callie didn't know but tones she recognized: emergency, betrayal, crisis. He ended the call, threw down what looked like a bank envelope, walked out without a word, without a backward glance. Kali stood there for 3 full seconds before her brain caught up. She looked down at the table. The envelope sat there, unsealed, the corner of bills visible inside. She picked it up with shaking hands, felt the weight of it, pulled back the flap. 50 $100 bills. $5,000. Her heart stopped, then started again, too fast, too hard. Through the window, she could see the man climbing into the back of a black sedan. The dragon on his neck flashed one more time before he disappeared behind tinted glass. Rick's voice barked from the kitchen. "Kali, orders up." The envelope felt like it weighed 10 pounds. Her fingers went numb. The eviction notice crinkled in her pocket. 20 seconds had already passed. 10 seconds left. Then 5. The bell above the diner door was still chiming when Kali's fingers closed around the envelope. The sound seemed to stretch, each tinny note hanging in the air longer than it should, marking the moment everything changed. "What have you got there?" Rick's voice cut through her paralysis. He'd materialized beside her, wiping his hands on a grease-stained towel, his eyes locked on the envelope like a hunting dog spotting prey. Kali's grip tightened. "A customer left this. I need to. Let me see." Rick snatched it from her hands before she could react. His thick fingers pried open the flap, and his eyes went wide. She watched his pupils dilate, watched his tongue dart out to wet his lips. "Jesus Christ. I have to return it," Kali said, reaching for the envelope. "He just left. I can still catch." Rick pulled it back, holding it against his chest like a shield. "Are you insane? Do you know what $5,000 is? It's not ours. It is now." Rick's face had taken on a flush, red creeping up from his collar. "Rich guy leaves cash on a table? That's a tip, sweetheart. That's how this works." He didn't mean to leave it. "You saw him. He got a phone call and nothing. He's gone. Probably doesn't even remember where he was eating lunch." Rick was already counting the bills, his fingers moving with practiced speed. "We split it, $2,500 each. You can finally stop whining about your rent." The words hit her like a slap. Kali felt something cold settle in her stomach. "I'm not whining. And I'm not stealing. It's not stealing if it's left behind. It's abandoned property." Rick had the authority of someone who'd convinced himself his own lie was truth. "Look, you want to be stupid about this? Fine. But that money's not leaving this diner. You try to walk out with it, I'm calling the cops. Tell them you pocketed cash from the register." Kali stared at him. 2 years she'd worked here. 2 years of his condescension, his petty cruelties, the way he docked her pay for made-up infractions. She'd taken it all because she needed the job, needed the barely minimum wage paycheck that kept her treading water in a city designed to drown people like her. But this was different. This was a line she could see clearly, bright and sharp as a blade. "Give it back," she said quietly. "Excuse me, the envelope. Give it back. Now." Rick's expression shifted from greed to something uglier. "You threatening me? In my restaurant? It's not your restaurant. You just manage it." Kali took a step forward. "And that money isn't yours. It isn't mine. It belongs to the man who left it, and I'm going to return it." "The hell you are." Rick shoved the envelope into his back pocket. "You're fired. Get out." For a moment, Kali couldn't breathe. Fired. The word hung between them like smoke. No job meant no rent money. No rent money meant the street. The street meant... She looked at Rick's face. At the smug certainty there, the satisfaction of a small man exercising the only power he had. And something in her snapped. Not broke, snapped into place, like a bone setting after a break. "Fine," she said. Then she lunged. Rick hadn't expected it. Nobody expected the quiet waitress to move like that. Kali's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist, twisting. She'd learned that move from her cousin Dante, before he got locked up, how to make someone's grip fail, how to turn their strength against them. Rick yelped, and the envelope tumbled free. Kali caught it midair, spun, and ran. "You crazy bitch!" Rick's shout followed her as she burst through the kitchen doors. The cook, Carlos, looked up from the grill, spatula frozen mid-flip. Kali didn't stop. She grabbed her jacket from the hook, her bag from the shelf above the time clock, and slammed through the back exit into the alley. The rain hit her like a wall. She hadn't realized it was raining. The sky had opened up while she was inside, and now water poured down in sheets, turning the alley into a river. Her sneakers splashed through puddles as she ran toward the street, her bag banging against her hip, the envelope clutched against her chest beneath her jacket. She hit the sidewalk and looked left, Right, desperate. There, half a block down, the black sedan was stopped at a red light. She could see it through the rain, sleek and expensive, water beating on its polished surface like mercury. Kali ran. Her lungs burned. Her cheap sneakers had zero traction on the wet concrete, and she nearly went down twice, her arms windmilling for balance. The light was changing, yellow. The sedan's brake lights were glowing red in the gray afternoon. She had seconds. Wait! The word ripped from her throat, but the rain swallowed it. The sedan started moving. No. Not like this. Not after everything. Kali put on a burst of speed she didn't know she had. Her body running on something beyond adrenaline, beyond logic. The sedan was pulling away, turning right onto the main avenue. She could see the dragon tattoo man through the rear window. His head turned away, phone pressed to his ear again. She reached the corner just as the car accelerated. Without thinking, Kali stepped off the curb directly into its path. Brakes shrieked. The sedan jerked to a stop 3 feet from her legs. Kali didn't move. She stood there in the middle of the street, soaked to the bone, rain streaming down her face, the envelope pressed against her heart like a talisman. The rear window rolled down. The dragon tattoo man stared at her, his expression caught between fury and disbelief. "You left this," Kali said. Her voice came out steady, stronger than she felt. She held up the envelope. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, he just looked at her. Then at the envelope, then back at her face. Behind them, a car honked. Then another. "Get in," the man said. Kali didn't get in. Not immediately. She stood there on the rain-slicked asphalt, water plastering her hair to her skull, the envelope extended like an offering. The car horns were getting louder now, angrier. A taxi swerved around them, the driver leaning on his horn and shouting something obscene. "I said get in." The dragon tattoo man's voice carried an edge that suggested he wasn't used to repeating himself. Kali's survival instincts, honed by 2 decades of navigating a city that ate girls like her for breakfast, screamed at her to run. Strange men, expensive cars. Nothing good ever came from mixing the two. But her feet wouldn't move. She'd already lost her job, already burned the only bridge she had. If she walked away now, she'd have nothing. Less than nothing. She circled around to the passenger side, her hand already reaching for the door handle when it swung open from the inside. Not the back door, the front, the driver's side. A man emerged, and Kali's breath caught. He was massive. 6'4", maybe 6'5", built like he'd been assembled from spare parts of other large humans. His black suit was tailored but couldn't hide the geometry of violence underneath broad shoulders, thick neck, hands that looked like they could crush concrete. His face was all hard angles and old scars, and his eyes were the flat gray of a winter sky before snow. Those eyes locked on the envelope in Kali's hands, then on her face. His hand moved to his hip, sliding his jacket back, and Kali saw the gun, just a flash of black metal in a shoulder holster, but enough to make her stomach drop. Dmitri. The command from the back seat was sharp, brooking no argument. The security guard, Dmitri, froze. His hand hovered near his weapon, his body coiled tight as a spring. For a moment, Kali thought he'd draw anyway, that she'd die here in the rain over $5,000 that wasn't even hers. Then his jaw clenched, and he stepped back, opening the rear passenger door with exaggerated courtesy. "Ma'am," he said. His accent was thick, Russian maybe, turning the word into something between a greeting and a threat. Kali's legs were shaking as she climbed into the back seat. The interior smelled like leather and something expensive cologne, maybe, or whatever the rich used to make their cars smell like power. The door closed behind her with a solid thunk that felt like a vault ceiling. Suddenly the rain was gone, the honking muted, the whole chaotic world reduced to this small space, and the man sitting 18 inches away from her. Up close, he was younger than she'd thought. Maybe 35. His face had the kind of symmetry that looked almost artificial, like a computer had designed it for maximum impact. But there were lines around his eyes, brackets around his mouth, the kind that came from stress, not age. The dragon tattoo curved up his neck, its scales rendered in such detail she could see individual lines of ink. The creature's head disappeared into his hairline, and she wondered absurdly where it ended. If it ended. He was staring at the envelope in her hands. Not at her. At the money. "You chased my car into traffic," he said slowly, like he was testing each word for truth. "To return this." "Yes." Kali's voice came out smaller than she wanted. She cleared her throat, tried again. "Yes. You left it at the diner. Table 9. I left it." "Yes." "And you brought it back." "Yes." He reached for the envelope. Callie let him take it. He opened the flap, counted the bills with quick, efficient movements. His fingers were long, elegant, at odds with the tattoo and the security guard and the whole aura of controlled violence that surrounded him. When he finished counting, he looked at her for the first time. Really looked at her. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they moved over her face like he was reading something written there. "It's all here," he said. It wasn't a question, but there was something in his tone, surprise, maybe, or confusion. "Of course it is. You didn't take any." "No. Your manager didn't take any." Callie's laugh came out bitter. "He tried. I stopped him." One of his eyebrows rose fractionally. "Stopped him. I quit, or got fired. Hard to tell which happened first." The reality of it hit her as she said the words. No job, no reference, no way to pay rent by Friday. She'd thrown away her lifeline to return money to a man who probably spent more on his watch than she made in a year. The man studied her for a long moment. Outside, Dmitri had gotten back in the driver's seat, and the car was moving again, pulling into traffic with smooth precision. Callie realized with a jolt that she hadn't asked where they were going. That she was in a car with two strange men, being taken somewhere she didn't know. Why? The question cut through her rising panic. The dragon tattoo man was still watching her, his expression unreadable. "You clearly need the money. Your shoes have holes in them. Your jacket is 3 seasons old and wasn't expensive when it was new. You worked at a diner that pays minimum wage, so why bring it back?" Callie met his eyes. She had nothing left to lose, nothing left to hide behind. "Because I'm broke, not broken." The words hung in the air between them. She watched something shift in his expression, not softening, exactly, but changing. Like he'd been looking at a picture and suddenly saw the image hidden inside it. "Broke, not broken," he repeated, almost to himself. Then, "What's your name?" "Callie. Callie Parker. Callie Parker." He said it like he was filing it away somewhere, committing it to memory. "I'm Ryu Young, and you just did something very stupid or very brave. I haven't decided which yet." "Neither have I," Callie admitted. For the first time, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "No. Student loans? $23,000 worth. Rent due Friday, and I'm already 3 days late." Ryu Young nodded slowly, like she'd just confirmed something he'd suspected. He pulled out his phone, typed something with his thumbs, then looked back at her. "How would you feel about working for me?" Callie's brain short-circuited. "I what?" "I need someone honest. Someone who won't steal from me, lie to me, or sell me out for profit." His voice was flat, matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "In my experience, that person doesn't exist. But you just chased my car through the rain to return $5,000 you desperately needed. So either you're the honest person I've been looking for, or you're playing a very sophisticated long game. I'm not playing anything. Then you're hired, provisionally. Trial period, 6 months. If you survive that, we'll discuss permanent placement." "Survive?" The word caught in Callie's throat. Ryu Young's expression went cold. "I run Young Dynamics. We develop AI security systems for corporations and governments. Our smallest contract is worth 8 figures. We have competitors who would kill for our proprietary code. Literally kill. My employees need to be smart, loyal, and capable of keeping secrets that matter." He leaned forward slightly, and Callie saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "I'm surrounded by people who smile at me while planning how to stab me in the back. People who would sell their own mothers for a percentage point. But you," he gestured at her with the envelope, "you gave up your job to return money that could have saved you. That's either integrity or insanity. What if it's both? Then you'll fit right in." He settled back against the leather seat. "Salary is $60,000 to start. Health insurance, paid time off. I'll advance you enough to cover your rent and student loans today. You'll work directly with me as a personal aide until I determine where your skills are best utilized." Callie's head was spinning. 60,000. That was more than double what she made at the diner. That was enough to breathe. To live instead of just survive. "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "You don't know me. I'm nobody. You're somebody who ran into traffic in the rain to do the right thing when nobody was watching." Ryu Young extended his hand. "That's rarer than you think." Callie looked at his hand, at the dragon scales visible on his wrist, at the expensive watch, the perfectly tailored suit, the entire world of wealth and power he represented. Then she looked down at her own hand, still wet from the rain, her chipped nail polish, the calluses from carrying trays. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, certain. "Welcome to Young Dynamics, Callie Parker," Ryu said. "Try not to die." The car glided through downtown traffic like it existed in a different dimension from the taxis and delivery trucks. Callie pressed herself against the leather seat, acutely aware that she was leaving wet marks on upholstery that probably cost more than her security deposit. Dmitri hadn't said a word since they'd started moving, but she could feel his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror, assessing her like a threat that hadn't been neutralized yet. Ryu was typing on his phone, his thumbs moving in rapid bursts. Whatever he was writing required his full attention, his brow furrowed in concentration. Callie used the silence to try to process what had just happened. 10 minutes ago, she'd been a waitress with holes in her shoes and an eviction notice in her pocket. Now she was what? An employee of a tech billionaire? A provisional hire who might not survive 6 months? "There's something you need to understand," Ryu said without looking up from his phone. "The people I work with, they're the best in their fields. PhDs from Stanford and MIT, strategists who've closed deals worth more than some countries' GDP. They're brilliant, ambitious, and completely without loyalty." He finally looked up, and his expression was harder than before, carved from something colder than stone. 3 months ago, my director of operations tried to sell our encryption protocols to a Chinese tech firm. Before that, my CFO was skimming money through fake vendor accounts. Before that, my head of R&D copied our entire AI framework onto a thumb drive and walked out the door at lunch. Callie's mouth went dry. "What happened to them?" "Prison. All 3 of them." Ryu's smile was sharp enough to cut. "I don't forgive betrayal, but I also can't seem to avoid hiring people who see me as a stepping stone or a bank account to raid." The car turned onto a street Kaylee recognized, the financial district, where the buildings were all glass and steel and reached toward the sky like monuments to money. She'd walked through here once, years ago, and felt like an ant among giants. "You're telling me this, why?" Callie asked. "Because I want you to know what you're walking into. Young Dynamics isn't a diner. The stakes aren't whether someone gets their food on time. The stakes are billions of dollars, international contracts, technology that governments would kill for." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on hers. "And the people around me? They're snakes, beautiful, charming snakes who smile at me in meetings and then try to sink their fangs in my back the moment I turn around." Callie thought about Rick, about the way he'd tried to pocket the money and threatened to call the cops when she resisted. Small-time, evil, petty, and mean. What Ryu was describing sounded like something else entirely evil with a budget and a business plan. "So why hire me? I don't have a degree. I don't know anything about tech or AI or... You know how to be honest when it costs you something." Ryu cut her off. "Do you understand how rare that is? I can hire 1,000 people with degrees. I can buy expertise, intelligence, skill. But integrity?" He shook his head. "That can't be bought. Either you have it or you don't. And you proved you have it when you chased my car." The sedan pulled up to a building that was all dark glass and sharp angles, the kind of architecture that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. The Young Dynamics logo glowed above the entrance, a stylized dragon in silver and blue. Callie felt her stomach clench. Ryu reached into his jacket and pulled out a wallet. From it, he extracted a black card that caught the light like polished obsidian. He held it out to her. "This is a corporate card. There's a $50,000 limit. Use it to handle your immediate problems. Rent, student loans, whatever you need. Get yourself some professional clothes. You start Monday." Callie stared at the card. It was heavier than she expected, solid and real in a way that made her lightheaded. "I can't, this is too much. It's an advance against your salary. Consider it an investment." Ryu's expression softened slightly, just for a moment. "I don't do charity, Callie. This is business. I need someone I can trust, and trust is expensive." She took the card with trembling fingers. The weight of it felt like responsibility, like hope, like danger, all compressed into a piece of metal and plastic. "Why does it feel like I just signed my soul away?" Ryu laughed, actually laughed, a short bark of sound that seemed to surprise even him. "Because you're smarter than you look. You didn't sign your soul away, but you did sign up for a war." Dmitri had gotten out and opened her door. The rain had stopped, but the street was still wet, reflecting the lights from the building in fractured patterns. Callie stepped out onto the sidewalk, her wet sneakers squelching against concrete. "One more thing," Ryu said through the open door. His face had gone serious again. All traces of amusement vanished. "The people you're going to meet, they're going to look at you and see someone beneath them. Someone who doesn't belong. They're going to test you, undermine you, try to make you quit." "Sounds fun," Callie muttered. "It's not. But here's what you have that they don't: you're not for sale. When someone offers you money to betray me, and they will, you'll remember standing in the rain with $5,000 in your hands. You'll remember choosing integrity over survival." He paused. "That's your armor. Don't forget it." The door closed. The sedan pulled away, leaving Callie standing on the sidewalk in her wet clothes, a black card in her pocket that felt like a winning lottery ticket, and a loaded gun at the same time. She looked up at the Young Dynamics building. Somewhere inside, in offices she couldn't imagine, there were people who smiled with venom in their teeth. People who would see her as an intruder, a threat, or worse, as someone weak enough to crush. Ryu is surrounded by people who would sell their soul for a profit. Callie had met enough of them in her life, different tax brackets, same poison. The manager who stole from the tip jar, the landlord who demanded favors for late rent, the loan officer who suggested alternative payment arrangements with a smile that made her skin crawl. If you hate fake friends and toxic coworkers who smile to your face but stab you in the back, Callie thought, you'd understand why she was terrified. Why her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone to call Mrs. Gable and tell her the rent would be paid. Why she felt like she'd just stepped into a world where the knives were sharper and the stakes were measured in zeros she couldn't count. But she'd also understand why Callie was going to fight. Why she wasn't going to let the snakes win. Not this time. Callie stood outside Young Dynamics for 3 full minutes before she could force herself through the revolving doors. She'd spent the weekend in a fog of disbelief and panic, shopping professional clothes from discount stores. A cheap laptop she couldn't really afford, even with the corporate card burning in her wallet, and enough anxiety to fuel a small city. The black slacks and white blouse she'd chosen felt like a costume. The flats she'd bought pinched her toes. The lobby swallowed her whole. Marble floors stretched out like a frozen lake, reflecting the morning light that poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. The ceiling was 3 stories high, and the Young Dynamics dragon logo dominated the far wall in brushed steel that seemed to move when the light hit it right. Everything was sharp angles and cold surfaces, and the hushed quiet of a place where loud voices weren't tolerated. A woman sat behind a curved reception desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of white stone. She was beautiful in that precise, calculated way, perfect makeup, perfect hair, a smile that probably came with the uniform. Her eyes flicked over Callie once, cataloging and dismissing her in the same glance. "Can I help you?" The question sounded more like, "You're lost, aren't you?" "Callie Parker. I'm supposed to Mr. Young hired me. I start today." The receptionist's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. She typed something on her computer, her manicured nails clicking against the keys. The smile disappeared. "You're not in the system. I was just hired Friday. Maybe it takes time to. If you were hired by Mr. Young, you'd be in the system." The receptionist's tone had gone from dismissive to hostile. "Are you sure you have the right company?" Callie felt heat creep up her neck. This was a mistake. Of course it was a mistake. Billionaires didn't hire waitresses. Men like Ryu Young didn't hand out corporate cards to girls in wet sneakers. She'd been played, conned, set up for some elaborate. "Miss Parker." The voice came from behind her, deep and smooth like expensive whiskey. Right on time. Callie turned. The man approaching was in his 40s, maybe early 50s, with silver streaking through his black hair in a way that looked deliberate, designed. His suit was charcoal gray and fit him like it had been painted on. Wire-rimmed glasses gave him an air of scholarly authority, but his eyes behind them were cold and calculating. He moved with the confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. "I'm Director Choi." He didn't offer his hand. "I oversee operations for the U.S. branch. Mr. Young informed me you'd be joining us today." The way he said informed made it clear no one had consulted him. "Follow me." Callie grabbed her bag and hurried after him. They passed through security. Choi waved his badge, and a glass barrier slid open with a soft hiss. Callie fumbled with a temporary badge the security guard handed her, the plastic lanyard cheap and obviously different from the sleek cards everyone else carried. The elevator was made of glass. Callie could see the lobby dropping away beneath them as they rose, the marble floor shrinking to a pattern, then a blur. Choi stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring straight ahead. In the reflection, Callie could see him looking at her shoes. His lip curled. "Mr. Young has an unconventional hiring philosophy," Choi said as they passed the 10th floor. "He believes in taking chances on people who show potential." He turned slightly, his eyes sliding over her like she was something he'd found on his shoe. "I believe in credentials, experience, and proven results. We'll see which philosophy serves the company better." The elevator stopped on the 23rd floor. The doors opened onto an open office space that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread about the future of work. Everything was white and chrome and glass. People sat at minimalist desks with multiple monitors, their fingers flying over keyboards, their eyes locked on screens full of code and data. Callie couldn't begin to understand. Everyone wore expensive clothes. Everyone looked like they belonged. Callie felt every eye turn toward her as she followed Choi through the space. The stares weren't curious. They were assessing, judging, finding her wanting. A woman in a designer dress that probably cost more than Kallie's car whispered something to her colleague. They both laughed. Choi stopped at a desk in the corner. Not near the windows with the view of the city. Not near the kitchen area with its espresso machine that looked like it required an engineering degree to operate. In the corner, where the fluorescent lights hummed too loud and the air conditioning vent blew directly overhead. "Your workspace," Choi announced. The desk was empty except for a computer that looked 5 years old and a phone with actual buttons. "Mr. Young wanted you to start in a support role. I've taken the liberty of preparing your first assignments." He placed a stack of folders on the desk. The pile was easily a foot high. "These are contract reviews. Everyone needs to be verified for accuracy, cross-referenced against our legal database, and summarized. I need them done by end of business today." Choi adjusted his glasses. "I'm sure you're familiar with contract law?" Kallie's mouth went dry. "I know, I've never... Well, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You seem resourceful." His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Oh, and these vendor invoices need to be processed through our procurement system. The login credentials are... somewhere. You'll have to ask IT, if you can find them." He dropped another stack on top of the first. "And finally, Mr. Young needs his calendar reorganized. All meetings for the next quarter need to be reviewed and optimized. Some will need to be rescheduled. You'll need to contact the other parties directly. Many of them are international, so mind the time zones." A third stack joined the others. "I believe several are in Korean. I trust that won't be a problem?" Callie stared at the mountain of paper. This wasn't work. This was designed to humiliate her, to break her, to make her walk out before lunch. "Any questions?" Choi asked. "About 1,000. But Callie had learned a long time ago that showing weakness to predators only made them bite harder. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and met his eyes. "What time does the office close?" 6 p.m. Sharp. Choi's smile widened. "But feel free to stay late. I often do. Dedication is so important in this industry." He walked away, his expensive shoes clicking against the polished floor. Callie heard him stop near a cluster of desks, heard his voice drop to a conversational volume. "Charity case. Waitress. Apparently. Give her 3 days before she cracks." Laughter rippled through the office. Callie sat down at her desk, the chair squeaking under her weight. She looked at the stacks of folders, at the ancient computer, at the phone that probably predated smartphones by a decade. Then she opened the first folder and started reading. By hour 3, Callie's eyes were burning. The contract language swam on the screen like it was written in a foreign language, which, technically, it was. Legal English might as well have been Mandarin for all the sense it made. Terms like indemnification clauses and force majeure provisions blurred together into alphabet soup. She'd managed to get through exactly 4 contracts. There were 63 in the first stack alone. The procurement system had taken an hour just to access. IT had finally sent her login credentials after she'd called 3 times, each call requiring her to navigate a phone tree that seemed designed by someone who hated humanity. Once she was in, the system looked like it had been designed in 1997 and never updated. Every invoice required 17 fields of data entry, and the system crashed twice, erasing her work both times. The calendar situation was impossible. Ryu's schedule was a maze of back-to-back meetings with names she couldn't pronounce and companies she'd never heard of. Moving one meeting created a domino effect that conflicted with 5 others. She'd sent exactly 2 rescheduling emails and gotten 3 out-of-office replies and 1 response in Korean that Google Translate turned into gibberish about unfortunate timing for fish. But the worst part wasn't the work. It was the invisibility. Callie had noticed it around hour 2. People walked past her desk like she was furniture. They didn't say hello, didn't acknowledge her presence. When she'd asked a passing woman where the printer was, the woman had looked through her like she was made of glass and kept walking. It was exactly like the diner. The same dynamic, different tax bracket. She was the help, the hired nobody, beneath notice. At first it stung. Then, somewhere around the time she was wrestling with invoice number 23, Callie realized something. Invisible people hear things they're not supposed to hear. The office kitchen was right behind her desk. She'd been too intimidated to use it. The espresso machine looked like it required a pilot's license, and the refrigerator was full of labeled lunches that probably cost more than her grocery budget for a week. But people used it constantly. They made coffee, heated up food, stood around talking while they waited for the microwave. And they talked like Callie wasn't there. Stock price is going to tank when the news breaks. Told him the encryption was flawed, but he wouldn't listen. Sleeping with someone in accounting, I'm telling you. Callie kept her head down, her fingers moving over the keyboard, her face carefully blank. But she was listening, filing away every word, every tone, every piece of gossip and corporate intelligence that floated past her desk like smoke. She was halfway through her pathetic lunch, a protein bar from the vending machine, when she heard Choi's voice. He was in the kitchen with someone else, their voices low but not quite whispered. Kallie's desk was positioned so she could see them in the reflection of her monitor if she angled it right. Choi was making tea, his movements precise and controlled. The man with him was younger, maybe early 30s, with slicked back hair and a suit that screamed money. Needs to happen before the quarterly review, the younger man was saying. If the board sees the numbers, they won't. Choi's voice was calm, almost soothing. The merger will be announced next week. By the time anyone realizes what we've done, it'll be too late to stop it. Callie's fingers froze over the keyboard. Merger? She hadn't seen anything about a merger in Ryu's calendar. No meetings labeled acquisition or merger discussion. Nothing. You're sure Young doesn't know? The younger man sounded nervous. Ryu is brilliant with technology, but business? Choi laughed softly. He's naive. He actually believes people work for passion and loyalty. It makes him easy to manage. And the price? $60 million for the complete framework. Clean transfer, no traces. Our friends at Vertex Technologies are very eager. Kallie's blood went cold. Vertex Technologies. She'd seen that name. Where had she the contracts? The stack Choi had given her. There had been a Vertex contract in there, buried in the middle. Something about consulting services and technology assessment. What about the new girl? The charity case? The younger man jerked his head toward Kallie's general direction. Choi glanced over. Callie kept her eyes on her screen, her posture slumped. Everything about her screaming exhausted and overwhelmed, which wasn't hard because she was both those things. Please, Choi's voice dripped contempt. She's a waitress playing dress-up. She'll be gone by Wednesday. Even if she stays, she doesn't matter. She doesn't even understand what company she works for. They moved away, still talking, but their voices dropped too low for Callie to catch anything else. She sat frozen at her desk, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. A merger, a secret merger. $60 million for what had he said? The complete framework? That had to mean Young Dynamics AI technology. The encryption protocols, the security systems that Ryu had said governments would kill for. Choi was selling it, to a rival company, next week, and nobody knew except her. The invisible waitress, who didn't matter. Kallie's hand shook as she reached for her mouse. She opened a new browser window, typed in Vertex Technologies. The company website loaded sleek, professional, almost identical to Young Dynamics. Direct competitor. Same market, same technology space. If they got Young Dynamics' proprietary framework, they wouldn't just have an advantage. They'd have everything. She closed the browser quickly as someone walked past. Her mind was racing. She needed to tell Ryu. Right now, this afternoon. But how? She didn't have his direct number. She didn't have access to his private email. Everything went through Choi first. Choi, who was in the process of committing corporate treason and would absolutely destroy her if he suspected she knew. The ancient phone on her desk rang, making her jump. She stared at it for 2 rings before picking up. Miss Parker. It was Choi. Of course it was. I need those contract summaries by 5 p.m. Not 6. 5. I have a meeting. A pause. Are you on track? Callie looked at the stacks of folders. She'd completed maybe 10% of what he'd assigned. I'm working on it. Work faster. He hung up. Callie set the phone down carefully, her hand still trembling. She opened the next contract, but the words wouldn't focus. All she could think about was Choi's voice, the casual way he'd said 60 million, the way he'd looked at her like she was nothing, because that's what invisible people were. Nothing. Furniture. Wallpaper. But invisible people also saw everything, heard everything, knew everything, and sometimes, when the stakes were high enough, nothing became something very dangerous. Callie pulled out her phone, angled it toward her lap where no one could see, and started typing. Everything she'd heard, every word she could remember, timestamps, names, The Vertex contract. She sent it to herself in a draft email. Didn't hit send. Just saved it. Then she went back to work on the contracts, her face carefully blank, her posture defeated. Just another invisible woman who didn't matter. Except now she mattered more than anyone in this building realized. Callie made it to Thursday. 3 days of drowning in impossible work, of being invisible, of listening. She'd heard 17 conversations she probably wasn't supposed to hear, learned the names of 3 people having affairs, 2 who were planning to quit, and 1 who was embezzling through fake travel expenses. But nothing else about the Vertex merger. Choi had gone silent on that front, conducting his business behind closed doors in conference rooms Kali couldn't access. She'd almost convinced herself she'd misheard, that her exhausted brain had taken innocent words and twisted them into conspiracy. Almost. Then Thursday afternoon, Choi walked past her desk and stopped. Just for a second. His eyes flickered to her, then to her computer screen where she had the Vertex contract open, cross-referencing clauses like he'd assigned her to do. Something shifted in his expression. Not alarm, exactly. More like a predator recognizing a threat it had previously dismissed. Working hard, Miss Parker? His voice was pleasant. Too pleasant. Yes, sir. Callie didn't look up from the screen. Almost done with the contract reviews. Excellent. Very thorough of you. He moved on, but Callie felt the weight of his attention lingering like a handprint on glass. She'd been made. She didn't know how, didn't know what she'd done to tip him off, but she could feel it in her bones. The same instinct that had kept her alive in bad neighborhoods at night, that had warned her when landlords were lying or when men at the diner had worse intentions than bad tips. Danger. She was in danger. The office emptied out around 5:30. People packed up their designer bags and headed for the elevators, chatting about dinner plans and weekend trips and gym classes that cost more than Kali's car payment. By 6, the floor was nearly deserted. Just Kali at her desk, a few stragglers in the far corner, and the hum of the air conditioning that never quite shut off. Choi was still in his office. She could see the light under his door, could hear the occasional murmur of his voice on a phone call. Waiting. He was waiting for something. At 6:15, Kali's bladder finally overrode her paranoia. She stood, her back protesting after hours in the terrible desk chair, and headed for the bathrooms at the far end of the floor. The women's room was empty, all marble and automatic faucets and luxury soap that probably cost more per ounce than champagne. Kali used the stall, washed her hands, stared at her reflection. She looked exhausted, scared, poor, despite the discount store clothes she'd tried to dress up with. She looked exactly like what she was, someone out of her depth, drowning in a world she didn't understand. When she got back to her desk, something was different. Nothing obvious. The stacks of folders were where she'd left them. Her ancient computer was still humming, but the air felt wrong, disturbed, like someone had been standing exactly where she was standing now. Kali set her bag down slowly. Her eyes scanned the desk. Everything looked... Wait. The bottom drawer. It was closed, but not quite flush, like someone had opened it and shut it quickly, not bothering to align it properly. Callie never used the bottom drawer. She kept her stuff in her bag. The drawer had been empty since day one. Her heart started hammering. She glanced toward Choi's office. The light was off now. He'd left. When? While she was in the bathroom? The timing was too perfect. Don't open it, her brain screamed. Whatever's in there, don't touch it. Walk away. Go home. Forget everything. But Callie had never been good at walking away from trouble. It was why she'd chased Ryu's car, why she'd grabbed the envelope from Rick, why she made stupid, honest choices that hurt her more than they helped. She knelt down and pulled open the bottom drawer. The hard drive sat there like a coiled snake, small, black, with a Young Dynamics asset tag on the side and a serial number printed in white, the kind of portable drive that could hold terabytes of data, the kind that corporate espionage was built on. Kaylee's hand started shaking. She didn't touch it, didn't need to touch it to understand what it meant. This was classified hardware, property of Young Dynamics, sitting in her desk drawer where she'd supposedly hidden it after stealing God knows what kind of proprietary data. They were going to say she was the leak, not Choi. Her, the desperate waitress with student loans and eviction notices in her recent past, the girl who'd do anything for money, the perfect patsy. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She heard the elevator ding. Footsteps, multiple pairs, voices. Choi's voice, loud and concerned. Unusual network activity traced to her terminal. I wanted to wait, to give her the benefit of the doubt, but the security team insisted, Kali's blood turned to ice. She looked at the hard drive, then at the approaching voices. She had maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds to decide what to do. She could run. Grab her bag and bolt for the stairs. But that would make her look guilty. Running always looked guilty. She could stay and deny everything. But who would believe her? The waitress over the decorated director with 20 years at the company? Or she could. Kali's hand shot out. She grabbed her phone, angled it, and took 3 quick photos of the hard drive exactly where it sat in the drawer, the asset tag visible, the placement obvious. Then she closed the drawer carefully, exactly as she'd found it, not quite flush, like someone had been in a hurry. The footsteps were closer now. Choi, security, maybe more. Kali sat down at her desk, opened a contract file, and forced her hands to stop shaking. She was a waitress. She dealt with health inspectors who showed up without warning, managers who blamed her for missing inventory, customers who accused her of shorting their change. She knew how to keep her face blank, how to look confused instead of scared. The group rounded the corner. Choi in the lead, his expression perfectly calibrated, concerned but professional. Behind him, 2 security guards in Young Dynamics uniforms, and behind them, a woman in a suit that screamed HR. Miss Parker. Choi's voice was gentle, almost apologetic. It made Kali want to scream. I'm sorry to interrupt your work, but we need to ask you some questions about network security. Kali looked up, let confusion cross her face. Network security? I barely know how to use the procurement system. Nevertheless, the HR woman stepped forward. We've detected unauthorized access to classified files. The activity was traced to your workstation. That's impossible. I've only been accessing the contracts Director Choi assigned me. And the calendar system, Choi added helpfully, which does require elevated access to Mr. Young's private schedule. The trap was closing. Kali could see the logic of it, the new hire with financial problems, given access to sensitive systems, stealing data to sell. It was clean, believable, perfect. Choi thinks he can ruin Kali just because she's poor, because she doesn't have lawyers or connections or anyone who'll fight for her. She'd seen this her whole life, people with power crushing people without it, knowing the system would back them up. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do just because you didn't have the power to fight back? Kali had. Multiple times. Stolen tips she never took. Broken equipment she never touched. Every accusation stick because her word meant nothing against authority. But this time was different. This time, she'd been paying attention. I understand, Kali said carefully. What do you need me to do? The HR woman's expression relaxed slightly. Compliance was good. Compliance meant an easy resolution. We need to search your workspace. Standard procedure. Do you have any personal items in your desk? Just my bag. Everything else is company property. May we? One of the security guards gestured to her desk. Kali stood, stepped back, her heart hammering so hard she was sure they could hear it. Of course. She watched Choi's eyes track to the bottom drawer. Watched him position himself for the perfect angle to discover the planted evidence. Watched him reach down, pull the drawer open, and, what's this? His voice was pitched perfectly. Shocked, disappointed. He pulled out the hard drive, held it up. This is classified hardware. Miss Parker, can you explain why you have this in your desk? Every eye turned to Kali. The security guards moved closer. The HR woman pulled out a tablet, ready to document everything. Kali met Choi's eyes. Saw the victory there. The certainty that he'd won. I've never seen that before in my life, she said quietly. Someone must have put it there while I was in the bathroom 15 minutes ago. Choi's expression didn't change. That's a serious accusation. So is planting evidence. Kali pulled out her phone. Which is why I photographed it. Time-stamped. Exactly where you found it. She held up the screen. Want to check the metadata? The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. The security guard on the left, a younger guy with a military haircut, actually took a step back. The HR woman's eyes widened, then narrowed. Choi's face remained perfectly neutral, but Kali saw his jaw tighten, saw the muscle jump beneath his skin. Metadata can be falsified, Choi said smoothly. And photographs prove nothing except that you found hardware in your desk. Hardware that our logs show accessed classified files from your terminal. He turned to the HR woman. This is exactly the kind of manipulation we'd expect from someone attempting to cover their tracks. But the seed of doubt was planted. Kali could see it in the way the HR woman hesitated, in the way the security guards exchanged glances. It wasn't enough to save her. Not yet, but it was something. I need to make a phone call, Kaylee said. That's not possible, the HR woman replied. This is an active security investigation. All communications need to be monitored until... Am I under arrest? Silence. The HR woman looked at Choi. Choi looked at the security guards. No, the HR woman finally said. But we need you to remain here while we complete our investigation. Then I have the right to contact someone. Kali kept her voice steady. She'd learned this from her cousin Dante before he got locked up. Know your rights. Speak them clearly. Don't ask permission. I'm calling Mr. Young. He hired me directly. He should know what's happening. Choi's expression finally cracked. Just for a second, but it was their panic, quickly smoothed over. Mr. Young is in meetings all evening. I'm his director of operations. I handle these matters. Then he won't mind if I leave him a voicemail. Kali was already pulling up her contacts. The problem was, she didn't have Ryu's number. She'd never needed it before. Everything went through Choi, which was exactly the point. There's no need to bother Mr. Young with... Choi started. With evidence that someone on his staff is framing employees? Kali cut him off. Yeah, I think he'd want to know about that. The HR woman held up a hand. Everyone calm down. Miss Parker, you're not being accused of anything yet. We're simply investigating. If you didn't access those files, then the logs will prove it. The logs will show access from my terminal, Kali said. Because anyone with admin access could log in as me and do whatever they wanted. That's basic IT security, right? She looked at the security guards. How many people have admin access to the network? The younger guard actually answered before the older one could stop him. Director level and above. Maybe 20 people company-wide. 20 people who could frame me. Kali looked at Choi. Interesting. This is absurd, Choi said, but his voice had an edge now. You're deflecting, making wild accusations instead of addressing the evidence. What evidence? A hard drive someone planted in my desk? Kali held up her phone again. I have proof of when I found it. 6:17 p.m. Want to check the building's keycard logs? See who was on this floor while I was in the bathroom? Choi's face went still. Kali's heart was hammering, but she kept her expression neutral. She was bluffing. She had no idea if keycard logs were that detailed, but Choi didn't know that. And more importantly, if he pushed the investigation that far, it might actually reveal something. The HR woman was typing rapidly on her tablet. I'm going to need to escalate this. Miss Parker, I need you to stay at your desk. Don't touch anything. Don't log into any systems. She looked at Choi. Director Choi, I'll need your timeline for this afternoon as well. Choi's jaw clenched. Of course, whatever helps resolve this quickly. The group moved away, huddling near the elevators. Their voices were low but urgent. Kali couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. The HR woman was asserting authority. Choi was trying to control the narrative. The security guards were just confused. Kali sat down at her desk, her legs suddenly shaky. She'd bought herself time, but not much. They'd pull logs, check timelines, and eventually the evidence would all point to her terminal, her access, her opportunity. The photographs helped, but they weren't enough. Not against someone as connected as Choi. She needed more. She needed proof that Choi was dirty, not just that someone had planted evidence. She needed the Vertex contract. The conversation she'd overheard. $60 million for the complete framework. Kali glanced at the group by the elevators. They were still arguing. She opened her bag, pulled out the cheap laptop she'd bought over the weekend. Personal device, not connected to the Young Dynamics network. She powered it on, her hands moving quickly. Her cousin Dante had taught her other things too, back when he was still trying to make honest money fixing computers in the neighborhood. How to check file properties, how to view hidden metadata, how to clone drives without leaving traces. Skills he'd learned in tech school before dropping out. Skills that had eventually gotten him arrested when he'd used them for less legal purposes. Kali pulled out the USB cable from her bag, then stopped. The hard drive was evidence now. She couldn't touch it, but she didn't need to. What she needed was already on the network. She navigated to her personal email on the laptop, opened the draft she'd saved days ago. All her notes from overhearing Choi's conversation. Dates, times, the Vertex name. It wasn't proof, but it was documentation. Contemporary documentation. The kind that lawyers loved. Then she pulled up the Young Dynamics employee directory, public-facing, accessible without login. Found Ryu's executive assistant. Found the general counsel's office. Found the board of directors' contact information. and she started typing emails. Not from her work account, from her personal Gmail. Detailed emails explaining everything. The overheard conversation. The planted hard drive. The photos with timestamps. The impossible workload designed to make her quit. All of it. She sent one to reuse assistant marked urgent. One to legal marked confidential. One to the board secretary marked time-sensitive security matter. Then, because she was probably already fired anyway, she sent one to the Securities and Exchange Commission tip line. Corporate espionage, planned merger, insider trading. Let them sort it out. The group by the elevators was breaking up. The HR woman was walking back, her expression serious. Kali closed her laptop, slid it back in her bag. Miss Parker, we're going to need you to come with us to a conference room. We have some additional questions. Am I being detained? We just need to clarify some things. Then I'm happy to help. Kali stood, grabbed her bag. But I want everything documented, and I want a copy of all the evidence you're using against me, including those network logs you mentioned. The HR woman's lips pressed into a thin line. That's not standard. I don't care what's standard. If you're accusing me of corporate espionage, I want to see the evidence. That's not a request. Kali's voice was steady, but her heart felt like it was trying to escape her chest. I know my rights. I'm cooperating, but I'm not rolling over. Behind the HR woman, Choi was watching with cold eyes. He'd underestimated her, thought she was just a scared waitress who'd crumble under pressure. And she was scared, terrified, actually. But she'd been scared her whole life. Scared didn't mean weak. This way, please. The HR woman gestured toward a conference room. Kali followed, her bag over her shoulder, her phone in her hand. The emails were sent. The evidence was documented. Whatever happened now, Choi couldn't make her disappear quietly, couldn't bury her without questions being asked. She'd learned something working as a waitress that Choi had never learned in his executive career. Invisible people saw everything. And when they finally got tired of being invisible, they could burn the whole house down. Kali just hoped she wouldn't burn with it. The conference room interrogation lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of the same questions asked different ways, of Kali explaining her timeline over and over, of showing her photographs and her notes, and watching the HR woman's expression shift from suspicious to uncertain to something that might have been belief. But it was Choi who kept pushing, kept insisting the evidence pointed to her, kept steering the conversation back to her financial desperation and her convenient access. They let her go at 11 p.m. Not cleared, not accused. Suspended pending further investigation. Kali walked out of Young Dynamics into the cold night air, feeling like she'd been hit by a truck. Her phone had 17 missed calls, all from numbers she didn't recognize. Her email inbox was exploding. Something was happening. Something big. She didn't find out what until Friday afternoon. The Young Dynamics annual gala was scheduled for Friday evening at the Zenith Hotel, the kind of place with chandeliers that cost more than houses, and a guest list that read like a Fortune 500 directory. Kali wasn't invited, obviously. She was suspended, probably about to be fired, and definitely not the kind of person who belonged at a black-tie corporate celebration. But her phone rang at 3 p.m., and the voice on the other end was Ryu's assistant. Miss Parker? Mr. Young has requested your presence at tonight's gala. A car will pick you up at 6. I'm suspended. I don't think. Mr. Young was very specific. 6 p.m. Please wear formal attire. Click. Kali stared at her phone. Formal attire. She owned exactly 0 formal dresses. Her bank account had enough for maybe a Target clearance rack if she was lucky. But the corporate card, the black card Ryu had given her, was still in her wallet. Still active, apparently, despite everything. She bought a dress. Simple, black, elegant, nothing flashy. The kind of thing that wouldn't stand out in a room full of designer gowns. Shoes that didn't pinch. A small clutch because her regular bag would look ridiculous. She felt like she was dressing for her own execution. The car that picked her up was a town car. Not quite as intimidating as Ryu's sedan, but still more luxury than she'd ever experienced. The driver didn't speak, just drove her downtown to the Zenith, pulled up to the red carpet where photographers were swarming, and opened her door. Kali stepped out into chaos. Flashing cameras, shouted questions, people in tuxedos and gowns that cost more than her college tuition. She kept her head down and walked quickly through the entrance, showing the invitation that had been waiting in the car. The ballroom was excessive. That was the only word for it. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, champagne fountains, a string quartet playing in the corner. The Young Dynamics dragon logo was projected onto every wall in shifting light. People clustered in groups, laughing, networking, conducting business disguised as celebration. Callie felt every eye turn toward her. The whispers started immediately. That's her, the waitress, the one who tried to steal. Miss Parker. Dimitri materialized beside her like a shadow gaining mass. This way. He led her through the crowd to a raised platform at the far end where a podium stood. Ryu was there, talking to a group of executives, looking sharp in a black tuxedo that made the dragon tattoo on his neck seem even more pronounced. When he saw Callie, he excused himself and walked over. You came, he said simply. Your assistant said it wasn't optional. It wasn't. His expression was unreadable. How are you holding up? Callie almost laughed. I've been accused of corporate espionage, suspended from a job I've had for a week, and I'm pretty sure I'm about to be arrested. So, living the dream. Something flickered in Ryu's eyes. Not quite a smile, but close. Stay near the platform. Don't leave. No matter what happens. What's going to happen? But Ryu was already walking away, moving toward the podium. The crowd began to quiet, people turning to face the platform. Callie retreated to the side, trying to make herself invisible. Old habits. Choi was in the front row, surrounded by other directors and executives. He looked confident, relaxed, champagne glass in hand. When his eyes found Callie, his expression didn't change, but she saw the message there. You're finished. Ryu tapped the microphone. Thank you all for coming tonight. This has been an extraordinary year for Young Dynamics. Record profits, groundbreaking developments in AI security, new partnerships that will shape the future of Mr. Young. Choi's voice cut through the speech. He stood, his posture apologetic but firm. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a security matter that can't wait. It concerns the woman standing by the platform. Every head turned toward Callie. She felt her face flush, her hands go numb. Choi continued, his voice carrying across the ballroom. We've uncovered evidence of corporate espionage, classified files accessed, proprietary data copied. The perpetrator is here, tonight. And I believe that I should let you finish ruining an innocent woman's life? Ryu's voice was cold. Sharp. Please, Director Choi, continue. Tell everyone how Miss Parker stole from the company. Choi's expression flickered. Sir, I have evidence. Network logs, physical hardware found in her possession. Hardware you planted. Ryu pulled out his phone, tapped something. The screens around the ballroom set up for the presentation suddenly showed a conference room. Security camera footage. Time-stamped Thursday, 6:12 p.m. The angle showed Callie's desk clearly, and it showed Choi, glancing around, opening her drawer, placing something inside. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Choi went pale. That's out of context. I was planting evidence to frame her for your own crime? Ryu tapped his phone again. Audio filled the room. Choi's voice crystal clear. The merger will be announced next week. By the time anyone realizes what we've done, it'll be too late to stop it. Another voice. And the price? Choi's response. $60 million for the complete framework. Clean transfer, no traces. Our friends at Vertex Technologies are very eager. The whispers turned to shouts. Executives were pulling out phones. Someone yelled for security. Choi backed away from his seat, hands raised. This is doctored. Fake. He's trying to destroy me because I discovered his pet charity case was recording your conversations? Kali's voice rang out before she could stop herself. Every eye turned to her again. I'm a waitress. Was a waitress. You know what waitresses are good at? Being invisible. Listening. Paying attention. She pulled out her phone, held it up. I documented everything. Every conversation I overheard. Every suspicious meeting. Timestamps. Locations. Witnesses. All of it. She looked directly at Choi. You thought I was too stupid to matter. That's why you talked freely around me. That's why you got sloppy. Choi's face twisted. You're nobody. A poor, desperate nobody. And you're under arrest, said a new voice. Federal agents were moving through the crowd, badges out. The lead agent, a woman in a dark suit, walked straight to Choi. Director Choi, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. Kali watched them cuff him, watched the color drain from his face as they read him his rights, watched him look around frantically for support and find only turned backs and disgusted faces. Director Choi thought money made him superior, but integrity is the only currency that matters. Kali had learned that the hard way, over and over. Every time someone with money and power had tried to make her feel small, Every time the system told her she didn't matter. If you believe good character always wins in the end, you're naive. It doesn't. Not usually. Not without a fight. But sometimes, if you're stubborn enough and lucky enough and angry enough, it wins. The agents led Choi out. The ballroom stayed silent until the doors closed. Then the noise erupted, everyone talking at once. Phones out. Scandalized excitement in the air. Ryu walked over to Kali. That was quite a speech. I'm fired, aren't I? Are you insane? You just saved my company. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is your official offer letter. Head of Ethics and Corporate Relations. Salary of $150,000. Full benefits. And enough of a signing bonus to handle your student loans and whatever else you need. Kali's hands shook as she took the envelope. I don't know what that job even means. It means you keep people honest. Keep me honest. You watch, you listen, and when you see something wrong, you fix it. Ryu's expression softened slightly. You're good at that. 3 months later, Kali stood in front of her apartment building with a cashier's check and a real estate agent who couldn't quite hide her surprise that someone like Kali was buying the property. Missus Gable, her former landlord, took the check with shaking hands and signed over the deed. Callie Parker owned a building. Not just an apartment, the whole building. 8 units. She immediately cut all the rents by 20% and started planning renovations. That night, alone in her apartment in her building, she pulled out her phone and looked at her bank account. The numbers still didn't feel real. None of it felt real. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ryu. Staff meeting Monday. Don't be late. And bring coffee. The good kind. Not the diner kind. Kali smiled. She texted back. The diner kind built character. But I'll bring the good stuff. She set her phone down and looked around her apartment. Same place, same furniture, same life, but different. Everything was different. She'd chased a car in the rain because it was the right thing to do. And somehow, impossibly, it had saved her. Not because the universe was fair. It wasn't. But because when you're invisible, people underestimate you. And when they underestimate you, they get careless. Callie had stopped being invisible the moment she decided to be seen. And she was never going back.